We need in every community a group of angelic troublemakers.
Social justice, power word, power word, power word. Social justice, power word, power word, power word.
Good evening to our friends on the East Coast, good afternoon to our friends on the West Coast, and good in-between time to our friends in the in-between spaces, which, again, many of us find ourselves these days more and more. So welcome to the Social Justice Power Hour. Welcome to the virtual headquarters of the Bayard-Rustin Center for Social Justice. My name is Robert Say the Schreiber. As always, I'm your host for the show and the chief activist here at the center, and I'm thrilled and honored, as always, to have you join us. We already have a robust audience, so thanks so much for coming out tonight. We are thrilled to have our guest here tonight. We are thrilled to have the show this evening. Thanks so much. This means a lot to us. It's an honor and a privilege to be able to offer this to the community and to have the community accept it in such abundance. And speaking of abundance, I do want to thank everybody that showed up on Friday night. This bears a bit of gratitude. We had over 3,000 folks join us live and 2,000 more watch it over the weekend. So 5,000 folks have tuned in to our special Jill Sobule pre-bit brain surgery shindig on Friday. I just want to thank all y'all for showing up and being so kind. We raised over $4,000 for our beloved friend Jill, and couldn't be happier about it. And we want to thank Jim Bogia, Tracy Bonham, Matthew from Nada Surf, Debbie Boone, Lloyd Cole, the band Betty, Jonathan Colton, Petra Hayden, Tom Morello from Rage Against the Machine, and of course Alan Cumming for coming out and supporting our friend and their friend Jill. It was an incredible show, and if you were one of the folks that didn't get to see it, it is still available on our video archive on our dedicated Social Justice Power Hour playlist. So please go watch it. Settle in. It's 2 hours. It was Power Hours, but it's incredibly well worth it. And it was an extraordinary evening. It was the epitome of what the Power Hour is all about: entertaining, empowering, and also helping out a friend. So thank you all for being with us that night. And by the way, spoke to Jill today. She was cleared by her doctor. We will be doing a post-brain surgery shindig on December 18th. So be ready. Friday, December 18th, Jill will be back with us post-brain surgery for another extraordinary evening. So come out for that, all my friends. I do want to give a shout out to another incredible member of our community. If they don't give you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair. This day, the inspirational Shirley Chisholm would have been 96. We celebrate her and are so grateful for the many trails that she blazed, making our journey in pursuit of racial and social justice that much easier indeed. If they don't give you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair. Thank you, Shirley. Happy birthday. And finally, before I bring on our guest tonight, and we're so thrilled about our guest tonight, what a great story we have. I want to tell you about what's coming up on the show, of course. Adam Gopnik is going to be rejoining us, author of 1,000 Small Sanities, and we're going to focus on this in a crystal and very meaningful way about prison reform and prison culture. And Adam's been writing about this for the past decade, so no one better to have that discussion with. We're going to have David Litt with us, who was a speechwriter for President Obama, wrote 2 great books, Democracy in 1 Book or Less, and Thanks Obama, will be with us as well. And finally, this week, David Brzezinski, Love Songs for Lovers of Life, renowned folk music artist. Cannot wait for another concert for him on Friday. And then coming up in the weeks ahead, you recognize this beautiful man. Billy Eichner will be here. Billy, not on the street, but on the Power Hour, my friends. Frederick Joseph just solidified this today. His book comes out tomorrow. The Black Friend on Being a Better White Person comes out tomorrow. Buy a copy. Come back here for our conversation in a couple of weeks. An extraordinary individual. He is also, if you're not familiar, he is the gentleman who bought 75,000 tickets to the Black Panther for inner city kids. An amazing, amazing individual. Maggie Smith will be with us, poet extraordinaire. Talia Lavin is going to be with us, wrote the book Culture Warlord. This book is about her going undercover, literally, in white supremacist rings. She is amazing because it's a horrible, scary story, but somehow she kept her sense of humor, so that conversation is going to be quite extraordinary. Pete Souza, still coming up, everybody. Official White House photographer under Ronald Reagan and Barack Obama, will be bringing his favorite photographs and behind-the-scenes stories about those. If you haven't seen his movie, The Way I See It, it's on MSNBC now. Do yourself a favor and watch it. It's a treat. Peniel Joseph is going to be with us. Dr. Joseph is, of course, a board member here at the Biography Center for Social Justice. We're so proud of that. He is also the author of The Sword and the Shield, which is a great book that exposes the false dichotomy between Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. You've seen him on every show. He's been all around, and we're so thrilled he's coming back to us in the Power Hour. And finally, today, I spoke to this man, Michael Penn, extraordinary musician, someone who I admire greatly, just released his first new song in over a decade. He'll be coming to us, and we'll be having an incredible conversation about his musical career and his activism. And that's just some of the highlights that we have coming up. I don't want to take up any more of our time tonight because we have an incredible guest with us as well this very night. And I want to share with you, first of all, the woman we'll be talking about is Dr. Dorothy Bolden Ferebee, who is an incredibly influential Black woman in 20th century America, but yet another figure who remains unsung and not given their due. Considering that is our very mission here at the Biography Center for Social Justice, absolutely thrilled to share her story tonight in the Power Hour. She was a groundbreaking physician and public health advocate, a trailblazer for the rights of women and African Americans, and leader of the century's most important organizations of Black women, the National Council of Negro Women and the Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority. She had the ear of presidents, members of Congress, and national policymakers. Her achievements helped pave the way for advances in civil rights, social justice, and women's empowerment. We are still striving for these things today, and we are over the moon to discuss Dr. Ferebee with the foremost expert on her story, author Diane Kiesel, who literally wrote the book on Dr. Dorothy Ferebee, She Can Bring Us Home. Diane herself is pretty darn inspirational. An author, law professor, and judge. She currently presides in Supreme Court New York County criminal term. She spent 16 years as a judge in a specialized domestic violence court in Bronx County and teaches a domestic violence course at New York Law School. Besides She Can Bring Us Home, she is the author of Domestic Violence, Law, Policy, and Practice, 2nd edition. She is currently working on a new book to be published by the University of Michigan Press, The Trials of Charlie Chaplin, How the Federal Government and One Woman Drove the Little Tramp from the United States. And I hope that when she publishes that one, she'll come back to us to talk about that. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming to our virtual stage our good new friend, Diane Kiesel. Diane, thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thank you so much for having me. And I must say I am very humble when I see who's coming up in the next few weeks. What an amazing group you've allowed me to be part of. I thank you.
Well, I want to thank you. And I want to also, before we forget, I want to thank our mutual friend, Heath Lee, who introduced us, who was on the show a couple weeks ago, who we absolutely love the most. You biographers, you tell the best stories and you have the best subjects. So who better to have on this show? So thank you so much for joining us.
Well, I like to think of biographers as time-traveling detectives, because that's essentially what you're doing. You're trying to unearth a life that is past, and you're trying to put it into modern context and make it meaningful. Well, I don't have to make Dorothy Ferebee's life meaningful. She made it meaningful enough. Dorothy Ferebee is what I like to say was the most famous women in mid-20th century America. But she was one of the most famous Black women. And in a less racist time, she would have been one of the most famous women, period. She was born in 1898 in Virginia to a very elite, educated, cultured family. And this family followed the teachings of Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois, who coined the phrase the talented 10th. And essentially what that meant was that the elite African Americans were charged with a mission, and that mission was to uplift the race. And this is how Dorothy Ferebee lived her life. And from the time she was a teenager in 1918, when at Simmons College she wrote an essay against lynching that was so powerful it ended up in the local newspapers, till the time she was a grandmother in Selma, Alabama, fighting for voting rights, which left her with a warrant for her arrest before she and Dorothy Height ran out of town, one step ahead of the sheriff. Dorothy Ferebee lived an amazing life, and she left a legacy that is carried on today, because obviously and sadly her work isn't done. So let me just tell you a little bit about who she was and her background. And I want to also focus on her finest hour, which is the Mississippi Health Project, which really propelled her into history. It forms the title for the book that I wrote, She Could Bring Us Home, and I'll tell you a little bit about that, and made her a household name in her day. So Dorothy is born in Norfolk, Virginia, and Virginia is very segregated at the turn of the 20th century. And so Dorothy attends, when she's a young girl, the Cumberland Street Colored School. Well, the purpose of the Cumberland Street Colored School was to train young Black people for the tasks that the segregated society thought they were up for, being janitors, being maids. Well, Dorothy's family wasn't having any of that, so she was sent to Boston to be educated there. Now, unlike Boston had integrated its public schools in the 1850s. Remember, the United States of America didn't do so until Brown versus the Board of Education. So we're talking about a very progressive school system. Dorothy basically aced every course she ever took. She was an amazing student. She went to Simmons College, graduated in 1918, and then decided she wanted to be a doctor. She maintained that she wanted to be a doctor since she was a little girl, stitching up birds that fell out of trees and help fixing their broken wings, and she was strongly encouraged by her parents to do this. But we need to think about this. We don't think so much today about women physicians or African American physicians. When Dorothy Ferebee decided in 1920 to enter medical school and was accepted at Tufts, there were 65 Black women doctors in the entire United States. This was really grasping at a brass ring that is basically an amazing achievement. Dorothy was one of, I believe, 7 women at Tufts and a handful of African Americans. She graduated near the top of her class and sat back while all of the white students got these great internships. But because an application for an internship required a photograph and her face was Black, there were no internships for her. So Dorothy did what she does best. and she takes a civil service exam, which allows her to become eligible for an internship at what was then Freedman's Hospital, which later became part of Howard University. Howard University, as many of you may know, was called the Black Harvard at the turn of the 20th century because African Americans were not admitted to Harvard in any great numbers, or very few numbers at all. And Dorothy had an internship. She became an obstetrician gynecologist, and she ended up serving the African American community in Washington, D.C. And Washington, D.C. had a very, very strong Black professional class of which Dorothy was a part. So that could have been it for her, right? She's now the 66th doctor, if you will, in the United States. She could just do fine. She'd have a nice life for herself. But that's not enough for Dorothy, because she really holds in her heart this uplift the race philosophy. So she searches around for a social work project that will not only uplift the race, but satisfy her. Well, again, we need to step back. I don't think we can appreciate today what this means. Today, we have Medicare, we have Medicaid, we have Social Security, we have unemployment insurance. We had none of that when Dorothy started out as a professional in the mid-1920s. Basically, we had the wealthy being able to take care of themselves and the poor depending on charity. So for African Americans, this often meant working through churches and women's organizations to help people who needed assistance. The first thing Dorothy sees is in Washington, D.C., in her neighborhood where she lived, which was a Black neighborhood, where she didn't go by choice. She went because Washington, D.C. was a segregated society. She lived where she could. She noticed a lot of Black children running around unsupervised. Is this because their mothers didn't care about them? No. It's because their mothers were employed taking care of white children, and the Black children had no one to watch them. So Dorothy immediately realizes there's a need, and so the first major project she gets involved in is the development of Friendship House. The Southwest Neighborhood House. Friendship House was actually the white, what do you call them? Settlement houses that wouldn't accept Black children. So what does she do? She starts her own. But the real key to understanding who Dorothy was and to understanding her celebrity and her power is with the Mississippi Health Project. The Mississippi Health Project was started by Alpha Kappa Alpha, which was the sorority that began at Howard University in 1908. The vice president-to-be, Kamala Harris, is a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha. And the whole mission of this sorority was not to have parties like many sororities are known for, which I'm sure are fun and useful. The purpose of Alpha Kappa Alpha was, again, to help people who needed that help among African Americans. So they're looking around for a project. And the first project they decide on is to go down to the South and to teach teachers how to teach children. Because in the segregated schools, the teachers, some of the teachers had 8th grade educations. But when Alpha Kappa Alpha goes down there to teach the teachers how to teach better, they realize that education is the least of the problems down there. There are children suffering in the 1930s from diseases that haven't been around for 100 years. Smallpox, for example, the smallpox vaccine was discovered in 1796, but in 1930 in the Mississippi Delta, there are still Black children who have not been inoculated against smallpox. So it's decided that what they need is to go down to Mississippi and bring health care to the poorest of the poor, who are sharecroppers and tenant farmers. Now, sharecroppers and tenant farmers are living on the most fertile soil on earth, but they're starving because the soil is being used by the plantation owners, although we don't have plantation and enslaved people anymore, but we have people who are living in a way enslaved to the land because they have no money, they're tenant farmers, they are living off of the cotton that they help till that gets sold, and they get whatever is left over, which is a pittance, okay? So Dorothy and Alpha Kappa Alpha decide to go down south and bring health care to the poor. But this isn't as easy as it sounds. How do they get there? Who pays for it? Where do they stay? I mean, these are African American women going from the Northeast to the Deep South in the mid-1930s. There are no hotels that are going to let them stay overnight. There aren't restaurants that are going to welcome them once they get below Washington, D.C. So they improvise as best they can. They go down in a caravan. They get other sorority sisters to host them overnight. When they arrive in the Deep South, they are going to run their health program, their little hospital, if you will, from an African American religious school in a place called Lexington, Mississippi. And the first day they open in July of 1935, there's nobody there. And Dorothy is like, what in the world is going on? We were told there was a big need for healthcare here. Where is everybody? Where is everybody? They're on the plantation, and the plantation owners are not letting them leave work to see a healthcare professional. So once again, Dorothy improvises. They load up their cars again. They drive onto the plantations, and they bring healthcare to the plantations. And it's an amazing thing. They throw sheets over ropes. They have their medications on dry ice. Their medications, by the way, which have been donated by various healthcare organizations, and they do what they can, and what they must. They end up spending 7 summers in Mississippi. And as a result, during that period of time, they bring healthcare, the most rudimentary healthcare, to something like 15,000 adults and children. And to understand the need for this, these are not people who have never seen a dentist. Some of these people have never seen a toothbrush. The need for this was profound, and it was recognized by Alpha Kappa Alpha. And to this day, the United States Public Health Service calls this one of the most successful volunteer health projects in history.
So this is amazing. I mean, this is a story that needs to be told, needs to be amplified, and it begs the question also of how many other stories, how many folks of color, how many LGBTQI folks, how many people of marginalized communities, their stories have not been heard or seen or recognized as well. And I want to thank you for bringing it to us tonight. And I want to ask you a 2-part question. The first part is easy, and the second part is a little more tricky, but it does need to be asked, I think. The first part is, how did you find this story yourself? Like, what inspired you to tell this story? Like, how did you find this story so you could bring it to us and all the rest of us? And the second question is this. As a white woman, did you ever have concerns for telling this story? And did you feel that it was appropriate and that you were the person to tell it? And I guess the follow-up to that, and I lied, I have a third question, is while you were doing your research, and I know that you went to the folks who knew Dorothy and members of her family and members of that community, was there any resistance to you telling this story?
Okay, so let's see if my old brain can remember these questions.
Take it down for water.
So you'll prompt me if I forgot. Okay, question 1. I didn't find this story. This story found me. I read Dorothy Ferebee's obituary in the Washington Post in September of 1980 when I was a very young journalist. And I can still remember sitting in my kitchen with my iced tea, which I'm never without, and I saw this story about this woman. And I said what you may have said when you learned about this book. Who is this woman, and why doesn't anybody know who she is? And I really felt that in many ways she spoke to me, primarily because I was a very young woman working in journalism in Washington, D.C. in the 1970s. Again, you know, it's only 45 years ago, but the lack of women in journalism at the time. I mean, we turn on CNN now and women are all over the place and people of color are all over the place, and those things are great. But when I was covering Congress for a major California newspaper, there were 25 reporters covering Congress for California newspapers. There used to be a lot of newspapers in this country, and there were only 2 women, me and the woman from the Los Angeles Times. So it was a very hard thing to maneuver and manipulate and try and be heard and taken seriously if you were a woman. So I looked at Dorothy Ferebee's obituary and said, my God, this woman not only had to deal with being a woman, 50 years ago, but a black woman as well. How did she do this? What kind of strength of character did it take for her? And I'm kind of a timid soul, so I kept looking to her for kind of some type of inspiration and to give me some courage to be able to be a little braver for myself. And I wanted to write about her in the 1970s, but the way leads on to way, and I ended up in law school instead. But I never forgot about her. And whenever I was feeling overwhelmed or tired or thinking I couldn't do something, I thought about Dorothy Ferebee, and I actually clipped out the obituary and I filed it away. And I actually carried this yellowed thing around for a very long time. And then I became a judge and a law professor, and I wrote a textbook on domestic violence. And that textbook ended up being 1,100 pages long, and I was exhausted after that. And I ended up, I don't know why, I ended up Googling Dorothy Ferebee. This was, we had Google now in the 21st century. And I figured by now someone has written her biography. And nobody had. I had seen a lot of articles about the Mississippi Health Project. I saw articles about her work in Alpha Kappa Alpha and the NCNW, but nothing, no cradle to grave biography. And I thought, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. Somebody needs to. This woman's been haunting me for 45 years. It's time. And so the first thing I discovered was that she had given only one major interview in her life. And that was about 8 months before she died. Radcliffe College was doing an oral history of influential Black women. And so I got a hold of that transcript, and I saw right away that the transcript there was a lot of gaps and a lot of meandering. And I later learned, of course, that Dorothy was very, very ill at the time she gave that oral history, and she ended up dying before it could be edited. And the editing fell to her surviving son, a dentist in Washington, D.C., who unfortunately died a year after she did. So that kind of got me started. And from there, I learned that her papers were at Howard University. And I basically spent all of my vacation time at Howard University going through 17 feet of boxes of everything Dorothy Ferebee had ever saved, sent, received, and started to feel a picture of her life. And I knew right away that because she was already dead for 20 years, almost 30 years, that I needed to find everybody who was still alive, who ever had any contact with her. And one of the first people I interviewed was Dorothy Height. And a family member was actually working at the NCNW when I was able to get an interview with Dorothy Height, who I think was already about 100 years old. Dorothy Height, by the way, was one of the longest surviving presidents of the National Council of Negro Women, a very, very influential woman. And I'll talk about the NCNW in a bit because that's really an important part of the story. But then I found family members. So then let's go to question 3 before we go to question 2. I think question 3 is, how was I received by family members? I could not have written this book without them. I pick up the phone, hello, my name is Diane Kiesel. I read your grandmother's obituary 30 years ago, and I've been haunted by her ever since. And by the way, can I come talk to you? Like, why did they entertain this phone call? But not only did they do that, but for the better part of 7 years, I called them constantly. I crawled around the attics of her granddaughter and her granddaughter-in-law because I wanted access, because I wanted to know everything about this woman, what she ate for breakfast, what she served for breakfast. And by the way, what she served for breakfast, none of us would want to eat because as wonderful as Dorothy Ferebee was, she was the world's worst cook. The minute she went into the kitchen, all of her children ran out of the house and found some excuse to be somewhere else. She used to mix boxes of cereal together to kind of stretch it, so your Rice Krispies and your cornflakes in one box. But be that as it may, I got her grandchildren to sign all kinds of releases for me so I could get grades, I could get death certificates, I could get all kinds of things that really weren't public that I had no right to have access to. So they were just instrumental in this. And I think it's because they recognized that their grandmother was a really important person. And they also recognized, with a little bit of anger, rightfully so, that their grandmother had been kind of ignored by history. And they were very pleased that someone cared enough to want to put in the time to do this. Now, after 7 years, and I'm still driving them crazy, what kind of perfume did she like again? And what kind of car did she drive? And they had enough, and they said, look, we're done. Send it to the publisher. But they were wonderful. And again, I could not have written this book without them. The larger question about being a white woman writing about a black woman is one that did concern me and still does concern me, especially in this time now when the issue of cultural appropriation has become much more at the forefront of our national conversation than it was. I could not presume for 1 second to be able to stand in Dorothy Ferebee's shoes and understand what it felt like or feels like to be a black woman in America. That would be presumptuous and completely inappropriate of me. And I didn't set out to do that, and I couldn't do it. But what I could do is be a journalist. And journalists are trained to observe, they're trained to draw inferences from facts, and actually do what I did as an attorney and as a prosecutor, which is put together a narrative, tell a story. And I felt very, very qualified to do that. I had been writing for 40 years. I had been a prosecutor for 10 years and was very good at finding witnesses who didn't want to come to court. So I could find all these people in Dorothy's life who may have been, not very interested in speaking, a place far away. And I certainly knew how to go through documents and be able to find nuggets of truth and information that was valuable. So that I felt I could do regardless of race. But I really would never want to paint a picture that somehow I could speak for African Americans in their view of Dorothy Ferebee. I can't, and I wouldn't.
So I just want to say we're a little over halfway through, and I want to just remind folks who are watching and folks who may have just joined us somewhere along the way, the book we're talking about is She Can Bring Us Home, Dr. Dorothy Ferebee, Civil Rights Pioneer, by our guest tonight. This is a fascinating story, and you tell it so well, and I want to give a shout out in general to biographers. I said it at the start. Not only obviously if you're good at what you do, and many of you are good storytellers because that's the very essence of it, but there's also a tremendous and I think unappreciated social justice component to what a great deal of biographers do. Whether it's you or Heath Lee talking about the wives during the Vietnam era, or even Brian J. Jones, who writes these great biographies and brings the social justice works of people like George Lucas and Dr. Seuss to the forefront. T.J. Stiles is another one. You know, there's a whole wonderful company of biographers telling these stories and bringing these important issues to the forefront. So we can't thank you enough for that, and really appreciate it. And this is the book, and as our dedicated volunteer, Chris is putting in the comment section, this book is worth having. It's really easy to get to. We have it on our bookshop.org dedicated list, and we love this bookshop.org because it gives back to independent bookstores. And when you put in your zip code, when you purchase the book, it actually gives to a local bookstore in your area. And this is a book that you should have because it's a story that needs to be told. It's a figure in our history that needs to be recognized and raised up. And it's a story that's very, very well told and well written. So that's the book, everybody. I would love if you're.
May I interrupt? Let me jump in. Can you put that picture back please, for a second? I'm going to be bossy now.
Yes. Okay.
Can you put the picture of the book cover back again for one moment, please? Okay. Here's where I want to give a shout out to Dorothy's grandson, Todd Bolding Ferebee, also known as Buddy. The title "She Can Bring Us Home" comes from his inspiration. In Dorothy's oral history up at Radcliffe College, she talks about their driving around Mississippi. And I just want to read one paragraph, and this is from Dorothy's mouth, not mine. Those at home who thought we were down in Mississippi having a big time should have been there to see what the difficulties were that we experienced. This was the days before the WPA built decent roads in Mississippi. The roads were nothing but mud or shale and sand and rock, little rocks and gravel. And when we traveled, we encountered nothing but dust. You couldn't see the car in front. No routes were marked. You didn't know where you were. But fortunately, there's something about me that I can always come back from where I've been. So when members of the team noticed that even without markings or signs, I could always get home, they made me the leader of the group because they said, wherever we've been, she can bring us home. And it was Buddy who told me, that's the title. And he was absolutely right. So yet another reason why I thank the Ferebee family. And look at that dress on her. Dorothy Ferebee was not only famous in her time, she was a fashion plate. She loved beautiful clothing, conservative clothing because she was really a church lady at heart, but beautiful, stylish. When she would go to Alpha Kappa Alpha annual meetings, the women would buzz about what's Dorothy wearing? What's Dorothy wearing? So she was a role model in many ways.
So a couple of things. Wasn't she actually, speaking of, we talked about Shirley Chisholm at the beginning of the show, wasn't she actually in Vogue with Shirley Chisholm, right? Yes.
In 1969, Vogue magazine did a special section on African-American women. Now, I think they probably would have called them Negro women at the time or Black women. They would not have referred to them as African-American using the terminology that was in vogue then. And Dorothy was featured with Shirley Chisholm, with Coretta Scott King, and I forget who. There were about 5 women. And Dorothy was described as a woman who could charm birds off the trees. That was the line about her. And again, it was recounting all of her many successes. And she was already, in 1960, she was already pushing 70 years old. And interesting little vignette, her photograph in Vogue was taken by the very, very famous photographer Irving Penn. And it is a stunning, marvelous photo, which I actually was able to convince the Penn archives to let the book have at a very, very reduced price. But Dorothy Ferebee was not in the least bit wowed by the fact that Irving Penn had taken her picture. In fact, afterwards, I mean, what person wouldn't want to be photographed by Irving Penn? She writes a letter to Vogue saying, well, my kids really didn't like it. They thought I looked kind of dour, but the photographer did the best he could with the subject. You've got to understand something about Dorothy Ferebee. Not only was she accomplished and brave, she was a character. Her voice was a cross between Eleanor Roosevelt and Rose Kennedy and the local elocution teacher. She spoke in very, very elegant, perfect diction. She had 2 children. Her 2 children, whenever she was driving in the car, she was constantly trying not only to uplift the race, but to uplift her kids. She would yell into the back seat of the car, 2 times 2. And when one of the kids said 4, she'd go times 6. And it would keep going until the kids couldn't do it. She was, I guess, what you'd call today a soccer mother. Very, very active in her children's education and their upbringing, but also because she was so busy running around uplifting the race, her children were often left in the care of others. Now, her husband, who was a dentist and who was a captain in the military during World War II and stationed in the Far East, in the Philippines, he was away, but he didn't get the kind of criticism that Dorothy did because, after all, child rearing is women's work, right? So, Dorothy tolerated a lot, not only because of her race, but because of her gender. And interestingly enough, at the end of her life, at I believe an AKA meeting or a National Council of Negro Women meeting, I forget which, she was asked what was the harder barrier to break. And at the end of her life, she felt that it was the fact that she had been a woman. And I was always surprised that that was her answer. But that was her answer.
So I have to say, when you got a little bossy before, when you were like, bring that back up, you were like, I'm gonna get a little bossy.
Being a little judgy, like the judge.
Exactly right. So I'm gonna give our audience a little behind the scenes. Diane emailed me at some point and said, although I'm a Supreme Court judge, do not refer to me as Your Honor or Judge. Please call me Diane. But after you got bossy like that, I feel like I had to call you Your Honor. Like that was like, Your Honor, I'm really sorry. Your courtroom.
I'm sorry.
No,
do you want to show some other Dorothy pictures, maybe?
Yeah, I would love. We have some wonderful photos from the book. So let's look at some of these, and you can tell us the story behind them. Mm-hmm. So can you see that one?
Not yet.
All right.
Oh, okay. This is the annual meeting of the National Council of Negro Women. And what you've got here is in the middle, you've got Mamie Eisenhower, because part of every year at the end of their annual meeting, all of the women from the National Council would traipse up to the White House where they would meet with the First Lady. And there you've got Mamie Eisenhower. She's shaking hands. The woman in the big corsage is Mary Bethune, who is the founder of the National Council of Negro Women. You have to understand the National Council of Negro Women. Black women were raised in the tradition of uplifting the race through social work. And that was a wonderful thing. But Mary Bethune was a friend of Eleanor Roosevelt's. Mary Bethune was actually in the FDR administration. She was the head of the National Youth Administration and became part of what was known as the Black Cabinet. And an informal group of African Americans, of which she was the only woman who advised both Eleanor Roosevelt and the president about issues pertaining to blacks. So she understood power. Mary Bethune decided, okay, social work stuff is great, but I want a political organization. And she founded what she called an organization of organizations. All those social work agencies, AKA, and nurses groups and teachers groups involving black women. She put them under a big umbrella. And there were, in the end, 850,000 women she represented. And she had one goal, to get a seat at that table, just like Shirley Chisholm spoke about years later. This was 1935 that she's doing this. She knew that if she wanted the troops to be integrated in World War II, if she wanted, if lynching to be stopped. Remember, one of the big issues in the 30s was that so that people wouldn't get lynched in the South. If she wanted anti-lynching legislation, if she wanted decent housing, public housing legislation, she needed a seat at that table. And so she founded this organization. She was made president for life, but after 11 years, she got tired. So who was she going to give the baton to? Well, Dorothy Ferebee was her personal physician. And being Mary Bethune's personal physician was no easy job because Mary was unfortunately overweight, had really high blood pressure, and she used to sneak sweets when Dorothy wasn't looking. So it was always tough to keep on top of her. Mary Bethune had a little black book at the time of her death, and there were two names in there of who to call in case of an emergency. One was her son, and the other one was Dorothy Ferebee. She trusted Dorothy, she respected Dorothy, and she single-handedly, although it was supposed to be in 1949 when Dorothy became president, an open election, Mary Bethune really engineered it so Dorothy would be her successor. So here we have Mary Bethune with Mamie Eisenhower and Dorothy Ferebee on the other side. And look at these women. These are the African American elites. Look at them. They're in fur coats. It's early November in Washington. It's probably 60 degrees out. They really don't need fur coats, but fur is a very important status symbol to these women in the mid-50s. So there they are in their finery going to see Mamie. This is Dorothy's family of origin. Her father is Benjamin Boulding. He was a postal service worker, became famous because he actually intervened during a train wreck of a mail train and intervened to save people back in 1903. By the way, being a postal service worker was a job of high status for African Americans at the turn of the 20th century. The average salary of any person in America then was about $400 a year. He made $1,000 a year. So he's an important guy. There's little Dorothy. She called herself the apple of his eye on his knee. There's her brother, her older brother, Ruffin. He became a lawyer, educated at Howard University. Her younger brother, not so much. He worked also as a postal worker. He was not as educated a professional, but did okay for himself. And that's her mother, Florence Boulding, a church lady. Florence, she and her husband separated for a while, and they did get back together. And one of the things that she did during her separation was to tell people that her husband was dead, because being separated from your husband was a disgrace, but being a widow was not. So I don't know what in the world she told her friends when he came back to life a couple of years later and they got back together. That has been lost to history. But fascinating, because when Dorothy and her husband divorced in 1950, he outlived her by 16 years, but she told everybody he was dead. So
the family.
Okay. This is Dorothy's grandfather, R.G.L. Page. His name was Richard, but he was always called R.G.L. He began life enslaved in Norfolk. And there was a raging yellow fever epidemic in the mid-1850s. And it kind of upended society, sort of a lot like COVID has done to us. And it became an opportunity for many enslaved people to be able to escape. There was a very well-known in Norfolk Captain Fountain, who used to ferry escaped slaves north for a price, of course. But little Dickie Page, as he was known then, was only 10 years old. He shows up in a book written in 1871 about ferrying people to New England. And through the help of what they used to call vigilance societies, those were the anti-slave people, he ends up in Boston in the home of a magistrate and his wife. And he ends up with his great aunt and his older brother being hidden there and being educated there. And Page became a lawyer, and after the Civil War, came back to Norfolk, and during Reconstruction was among the first Black members of the General Assembly. That's Dorothy when she graduated from Simmons College in 1920. That's Dorothy and her family. Look at her. Again, height of fashion, the beautiful fur. Now, this is a prosperous family in a decade of want. This is 1933, 34. And there are the beautiful twins, Dorothy Jr. and Claude Thurston Ferebee II. Her husband was Claude Thurston Ferebee. Now, this marriage was never great. Dorothy said in her oral history that when she had these twins, she was so pleased she had a boy and a girl, one for her husband and one for her. Their marriage was troubled because they were both high achievers, they were both highly intelligent, and I think in the 1930s, Dr. Claude Ferebee, who was a dentist, didn't like not being the king in his own castle, you know? And he didn't like being Mrs. Dorothy Ferebee, or Mrs. Dr. Ferebee, or Mr. Dr. Ferebee, whatever. You get what I mean. And I think there were jealousy issues. When she was traveling down to Mississippi, he used to like to go up to New York. He had a very, very hot love affair during World War II that threatened to break them up. But what really broke them up is the worst tragedy of her life, which is her daughter's death in 1950. Very quickly, there is a book by a Rutgers historian named Deborah Gray White called Too Heavy a Load. And it talks about how African-American women who are always being judged, always have to worry about their reputation in the community. And that was really in the forefront of Dorothy's mind. When she was running the National Council of Negro Women, she's testifying on Capitol Hill. She's going to the White House to talk to presidents. She's meeting with Eleanor Roosevelt. She and her family have to be of the utmost respectability, if you will. So her daughter becomes pregnant and at 18. And I think, based on my research, viewing her death certificate, viewing the contemporary newspaper articles at the time, viewing what Dorothy said over the years, I think she died of a botched abortion. Dorothy told the world that she died of pneumonia. And she kept up that fantasy, if you will, until her own death. And it broke her heart. It ripped her marriage apart because her husband blamed her. Not that she had performed the abortion, because quite frankly, she was an obstetrician gynecologist. If she had performed the abortion, she would have done it safely and her daughter would have lived. Her husband blamed her because he felt that because she was the president of the National Council of Negro Women at the time, meeting with Harry Truman, that the daughter was too afraid. Dorothy Jr. was too afraid to tell her that she was pregnant. And Dorothy, of course, once she died, was never going to reveal that because it would affect her status and her ability to be in that powerful position. Unfortunately, in the 1960s, when Dorothy was the chairperson of the DC Commission on the Status of Women, she fought very hard for a liberalized right to choose abortion law in Washington, D.C. And wouldn't it have been powerful if she had said, look, I lost my own daughter to a botched abortion. We have to change the law. But she couldn't even bring herself to do it then, which is very sad.
Yeah.
This is the Mississippi Health Project. Yes, this is a great picture. There are no roads in Mississippi. They get stuck in the mud as they're going from farm to farm to bring health care. And while you and I might go to Mississippi in July in T-shirt and shorts, not these ladies. They are in dresses and silk stockings. It's before the war, so they can still get silk. And probably girdles. It's 1950. And it's 1,000 degrees in the shade, and there's no AAA they can call when they get stuck in the mud. They are pushing their own car out. I should say, as part of my research, I took a friend of mine, also an OBGYN named Dr. Goldstein. We went down to Mississippi during the same 2 weeks that Dorothy went. We went in July purposefully to kind of recreate the trip. This was in the era of airplanes, air-conditioned cars, 5-star hotels, and we could walk around in shirts and T-shirts, and we found it unbearable. I cannot imagine what it was like for Dorothy with all of the barriers that I talked to you about, as well as having to be dressed like this, and she not only survived, she thrived. That's Dorothy in her older years. This is her friend, Ruth Scott. That's Dorothy basically lounging around, which is a rare thing for her. She had a summer home in a place called Morris Beach, New Jersey, which was segregated. It's where wealthy, upper middle class African Americans from Washington, D.C. and Philadelphia would go to relax, and that's where she would go. We done with pictures? Yes.
No, can you see this one?
No. Oh, this is a wonderful picture. This is Dorothy Ferebee and Josephine Baker, the very famous African-American entertainer. The National Council of Negro Women was always in the tank when it came to finances. As a matter of fact, during the 4 years that Dorothy was president, she often dug into her own handbag to cover bills and salaries. Dorothy Height does deserve to be, if Dorothy Height had done nothing else but one thing, which she accomplished, it was to make the NCNW a 501c3 organization so it could get tax-exempt status and so that people who donated could deduct it from their taxes. This did not exist during Dorothy's tenure. So they always had to have fundraising ideas. And one of them was, let's invite Josephine Baker to sing. They put this thing together. The way the organization is amazing. Within 3 weeks, they had invited her to come over from Europe to perform at this arena. They sold tickets. They hired an orchestra. And Josephine Baker came, and it was one of the biggest fundraising events in their history up until that point. And so they were in the black for a little while. And this is Dorothy again at the White House. She's much older now. She's with Dorothy Height now, and that's Patricia Nixon, Pat Nixon in the middle when she was First Lady. This was a few weeks before Nixon resigned. This was the day that the NCNW dedicated a marvelous statue of Mary Bethune, which is in Lincoln Park in Washington, D.C. to this day. Again, they raised the money for it. They got all the permits for it. And it's a wonderful monument to a wonderful woman. And afterward, they all went to the White House. But I just heard from my computer, it's 8 o'clock. I think I'm going to
Do you mind going over a couple of minutes? This is fascinating. I'll only
I don't mind, but I don't, people who are listening have other things to do and they should go do them. I won't be insulted and I won't know.
Stop it. This is everybody. I see the comments. People are fascinated. And by the way, I do want to give a shout out to our mutual friend, Keith Lee, who's writing a biography of Pat Nixon as we speak, I believe. So looking forward to that too.
Yes.
This is the last photo. We have one last photo. Can you see it?
Not yet. It's coming.
All right.
It's getting unveiled in a bad way.
It is a statue.
Oh, this is what I'm talking about. There's the statue. And this is amazing because this may be the only picture with all of the presidents of the NCNW up until Dorothy Height died in 2010. You've got Vivian Carter Mason. You've got Dorothy Height in the hat. You've got Dorothy Ferebee in the fur, of course. And you've got Mary Bethune in statue.
Just wonderful. I cannot thank you enough. Our community cannot thank you enough for telling this story. And there's so amazingly, there is so much more in the book. I mean, it is fascinating. And here's the book, and our dedicated volunteer, Chris, is in the comments section. You can find our bookshop.org list with all of the authors who have been on the show, and you can find it at bookshop.org at our list. And please, this is a great book, and these stories are just really the tip of the proverbial iceberg, and we thank you so much for sharing with us today. This has been fascinating and really a treat. You have really spoiled us with these stories and the photos too. Just a wonderful presentation of a wonderful book by a wonderful inspirational figure, your own self. And we didn't get to your story, and your story to me is incredible as well. And you're doing incredible work, and we'd love to have you back to talk about that too. Thanks so much for your time tonight.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
What an incredible story. What an incredible author. Thanks for being with us tonight. These power hours, again, are extraordinary, not because I'm sitting in this chair. It's because of the folks that come to us to share these stories about these, whether they're unrecognized figures in our history or someone we celebrate each and every day. It's extraordinary, the voices we get to hear every weeknight here at the Power Hour. But the most extraordinary part of it, my friends, is the community that comes out to share this time with us. So we thank you for being with us tonight. And hopefully, again, tomorrow night, the next night, and every night that you feel like you want to come to a community building conversation, equally empowering and entertaining, I hope. We are here 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, every weeknight for all y'all. And we will see you again tomorrow night at Queer Yoga, when we have our Tuesday nights and we take a breath, both literally and figuratively, to allow our bodies and our minds to come together and allow us to have a wonderful evening of community in that as well. And please be here with us until tomorrow night, 22 hours and 55 minutes or so. Please be good to each other. Be good to your families, chosen or otherwise. And especially in these days, be good to yourselves, my friends. Much love and respect. Thanks so much for being with us tonight.
We need in every community a group of angelic troublemakers.